Your typical African so-called leader, who are essentially misleaders, join politics essentially because the shortest cut to undeserved wealth is politics. If you want to acquire wealth that you have not worked for at all, become a politician in Africa is like winning a lottery. And they know it, and the people know it, and that is the tragedy of Africa. How can we deal with it? The quality of leadership also depends on the quality of followership. Part of the African problem is what a friend of mine has written a book about called negative ethnicity. The belief by backward people, it is always backward people, that their safety only lies in one from their tribe being in leadership. And I've always wondered, when you have a small child, ethnic group, and you are in the middle class and you are looking for a nanny, you are just looking for a good nanny. It must not be a hair, it could be a Shiwambo or anybody else. When you are looking for a driver or a lecturer, it doesn't matter. But when you want a president, you now think that they must come from your ethnic group. I've never understood that logic. Your child, who is with your child on a daily basis, you trust somebody from your ethnic, non-ethnic tribe, but the president who is going to affect your life, now you think, and permit me to use this word, some nincompoop from your tribe must be elected regardless of their ability to govern. I can never understand that logic across Africa. Across Africa. That if I'm a Zulu, the president must be a Zulu. That if I'm a Xhosa, the president must be a Xhosa. That if I'm a Shona, the president must be a Shona. What kind of logic is that? I'm submitting to us, and I can't agree with my friend who said about our mind. You know, we may not agree with it, but I'm going to say it. We of the Negroid blood, we of the Negroid blood, I'm saying this knowing that there are Caucasians here. There's something wrong with us. Until the day we admit it, we are going nowhere. Admission is the first step towards cure. In his book, Miseducation of the Negro, Carter G. Woodson says it. He says and gives an example where one 10-year-old Caucasian boy could control 50 Negroids, but an adult Negro could not control them. Right now, in my own country, we couldn't run the airline. We have brought a white man to run it. We couldn't run our civil aviation, our Kenya Airports Authority. We have brought a white man to do it. If you go to many hotels here in Windhoek, the chefs are Caucasians. And when you, my Negroid brothers and sisters, see that there is a Caucasian, you think it is being done well. When you have a Caucasian pilot, you are happy. I'm submitting to us, and Ngugi wa Thiong'o is right. The African must decolonize his undermined. That is why you are running to the United States of America. That is why when you are sick, you go to the Morningside Hospital in South Africa, and when you see a white doctor coming, you are up because you know you now be cured. These are painful things to say, but we must say them. It is only then that the reason why the Asians and the Arabs are beginning to rise is because they have reacquired their self-esteem. Self-esteem is the beginning of the realization of oneself. You know, I know some of you may not be very religious, but permit me to give these religious analogies to be found in the book of Matthew in the Bible, of this great rich white man who wanted to go away and called 3 of his workers, and he gave one 5 talents, and another one 2 talents, and another one 1 talent. And the Bible says he went away for a long time, and he came, and the one with 5 said, Master, I've worked the 5, they are now 10. And the one who was given 2 said, Master, I've worked the 2, and I now have 4. And to the one he gave 1, he said, I knew you. You are a man who is hard-hearted, who reaps where he has not sown and gathers where he has not scattered. I kept it in the belly of the earth, and here it is. And he told him, if you knew I was such a man, why did you not give it to the bankers that I may earn interest? And he called the one with the 10, let you be given in this one. And he said, and to those who do not have, even the little that they have shall be taken away, and it shall be given to those who have. And to we who have, even the little that we have shall be given to the Chinese. I'm submitting to us that the world is still about those who have will be given more. If you want that which is under the bed, you must bend. My submission to us, self-esteem. I would love to see people from Namibia scrambling to go to the business school in Lagos today. And there's business schools here in South Africa. I'm here in Namibia. I'm sure in the Namibia Business School at the University of Namibia, when they are teaching the case studies, is Enron. Oh, Enron. They are not studying about Nakumatt in Nairobi or Uchumi in Nairobi. We are drunk. And to continue and to conclude on that biblical basis, those of you who read the Bible, go to Paul's letter to the Galatians. He said, you Galatians, who has bewitched you? Who has bewitched you? Who has bewitched you? Who has bewitched you? Who has bewitched you that you believe that you are children of a lesser God? Who has bewitched you? Who has bewitched us? That is how serious it is. So I'm telling us that this continent will only be great, and you are young. I do not know whether you want to go to the United States of America. I do not know. Our young men and women must be here. The young Chinese are coming here. We must remain here. If we go to China, it must only be to school. So I'm submitting to us, and I'm now not speaking to the Caucasians origin, because the question as to whether being African or is the color of the skin that determines who an African is. It is the decision that determines. So you are African, but I'm now talking to your cousins, the Negroids. You Negroids, to which I belong, we must liberate our minds. We must regain our self-esteem. No, Japan assembles us. Prime Minister Abe assembles 54 African leaders, and they go there. 54 of them, they go to Japan. It would be easier if he came here. But 54 of them go there. You must wonder, what is wrong with this 54? Is it not easier for one to come so that he meets them in their environment that he wants to develop? European leaders call us our leaders, and they go there briefly, and as they are going, they inspect guards of honor in armies that cannot fight a war beyond 2 days if they are faced with an American weapon. Ceremonial armies. China assembles us in Beijing, 54 leaders going to China, complete in private jets. And when they come, they say the Chinese have now signed with us, all of Africa, $60 billion. which is half the size of the economy of Washington, D.C. $60 billion. And then we are beholden to them. And then we call those leaders unto death. They are. Which was the other question?
Very successful organizations are not supporting us. This brings me back to the points that you've raised earlier on, where we are saying if we take the Chinese and we take the Indians and we take the Caucasians, when there's business interest, they will support it. And part out of your teaching, what I would want to see is that everybody that is here will at least share a little bit of what they have and start supporting so that we can also have that independence, so that we can run these businesses successfully. And linked to that as well, today we have a lot of black successful executives that are running their own businesses. Never will you see them ever saying that let me advertise my business. Part of our survival is vested in that thing that says we are African and we will support those that want to support us. Instead, what we find would be the SME guy who's very small will come and say, look, please help me. And those we help. So the challenge and the jury is out for what I've just said now. Thank you very much.
How should the corporate leadership distinguish itself in a troubled political leadership? Then very finally, I would want you to share with us your view as to what is your analysis on Namibian institutional formation for the purpose of guaranteeing accountability. And are they living up to their task? The institution that you have spoken about, are they living up to their task in your view? And are they sufficient?
Thank you. Thank you. Let me perhaps once again, these are my thoughts, because when you prescribe solutions, it's assumed that you know all the facts. I don't. But from what I know and what I've gathered over the years, this is a very young nation. This is a very young nation that is in the process of institution building. And I think you got it very right that you are coming from our history, whose institutions are still alive, whose habits are still alive. So it is a process. And my own view is that we must learn from what other countries have done. Because many countries in the world have gone through these experiences. And I like giving the example, say, of North Korea and South Korea. These are people of the same stock. One made a decision that will use our intelligence, our human and other resources for purposes of generating things that will add value to our lives and also trade with the world. The net effect is that South Korea is the home of Hyundai, it is the home of LG, it is the home of Samsung, it is the home of many things that we consume in our countries and in our houses on a daily basis, with a GDP which is anything between 20 and 25 United States dollars, properly distributed essentially with the good Gini index. Up in the north, their cousins who are the North Koreans chose another path. The path of deification of their leaders and the path of making missiles and conducting nuclear tests every other day. And we see in the same region they can't feed themselves. They use their intelligence in another negative direction out of fear and paranoia, and the others are moving in a totally different direction. And those of you who are older will remember that both these countries were decimated to the ground during the Korean War of 1953. In other words, countries must make a decision. There is another place that most of us who are in the middle class have converted into our shopping mecca called Dubai. This was a backwater desert a few years ago. The leaders simply decided when they had the oil wealth in Abu Dhabi and in that general area, and we have 3 countries or 3 emirates in that country, or 4 countries, Oman, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. And those countries today, if you look at a number of industries, look at their airlines, the Emirates, look at Etihad, look at Qatar Airline. They are some of the biggest in the world. What have they done? Have they complained about the fact that they were colonized? No, they have not. They have been aware of it. They have tried to deal with it, but they have not made it an obsession. What I'm submitting to us is that we must be aware that we have this very negative past. But that should not hold us. Yeah. And I'm saying that what we should do is creatively, therefore, to ask ourselves, what can we do? What can Namibia do? And Namibia has done a number of good things. You know, if he wanted, because of historical claim to power, Sam Nujoma would still be the president of this country. He would be. And you, of course, there would be agitation here and there, but what would you do about it? Very little. But he made a conscious decision, which is a decision that helps institutional building. He has now demystified the presidency. He has demonstrated that presidency is something that you serve your term. He served 15 years, if I'm not wrong, and gave over to Hifikepunye Pohamba and his successor will have a successor. So progressively now, you are beginning to build that institution. You have a very young private sector. That young private sector is involved with a much bigger and a much stronger, a much more developed economy in South Africa. That umbilical cord must not be broken. But you must have a winning period where certain industries are now winning, but without breaking the linkage. And those in industries know better than us. In other words, you have a path which has worked, which you should now follow in terms of South Africa. You have a small market. You have 2 million people, and I think the purchasing market may not be more than 1/3. The real people who participate in the economy may not be more than 1/3 of the population. So you are the country, you with Lesotho and Swaziland, you should be shouting yourself hoarse about SADC. Because with SADC, you suddenly have a market of nearly 100 million. So that if you produce an item here, it could be sold in the SADC region. If you marshaled your resources in the Walvis Bay in terms of the fish and fish resources in the Atlantic Ocean and make people have appetite for fish, you ask the Danes what their fishing resources in Greenland and in the North Sea is doing to them. You have a beef industry here in the north. You must persuade the Herero and other fellows that having cows roaming around is not very useful. Because otherwise, it's not useful. And a friend of mine, because what happens is that you leatherize the meat. So what you do, but you don't just tell them to stop that. Create systems. Tell them if water is your problem, within every mile we are going to have water points. If fodder is your problem, we are going to ensure that we have fodder, so that you have these diva cows which are fed as they sit, and the quality of the beef is then improved in that way. In that way, you will have improved your agriculture. In other words, if you go sector by sector, you will discover 100 years from today, when you are gone yourself, you're upstairs, things will be working very well. And that is how you must look at nations. The problem with many of our leaders is that we start things and we want to see the results in our lifetime. Instant coffee solutions for nations can never happen. Today, if you go to the United States of America, they are talking about the exploits of Abraham Lincoln. The man fought the Civil War. He walked on the gate of a donkey and an horse-drawn cart. So, but today we are in the jet age. But we know that for Abraham Lincoln, we will not have jets. 100 years from today, Namibians will be saying there was a man called Hosea Kutako, who helped Sam Muyoma, who participated in the struggle. They'll be singing praises of Sam Muyoma and Handi Mbahama and Toivo ya Toivo. That is the way it is done. But it will not be easy. It has never been easy. You ask any country, read the history of any country, whether it's the United Kingdom, whether it's India, all of them, they have had these difficulties. So I have faith that institutions should be built. Gluttony. You know, the African leader is a species that deserves keen study by psychologists and psychiatrists at once. Because, and I say this very seriously, look at somebody like Mobutu Sese Seko, who went in the middle of his village, built something that is out of this world in Badolita. You know, it was destroyed when they threw him out of power. This fellow at one time had more money than the Central Bank of Zaire, as DRC Congo was then called. Then you ask yourself, when he or she sleeps, what are the dreams that visit him? Because leadership, even in the little things that we do, even in your own little company, what worries you is the quality of the human resource, because that is the greatest resource. Make your workers happy, and you are halfway through the job. Has Africa had good leaders? Does Africa have good leaders? Yes, it has, but they are few and far between. Let me start with the early ones. On his departure from office after 24 years, Zambia's Kenneth David Kaunda had only $8,000 in his account. The world could not believe it. They tried looking for accounts everywhere, they could find none. Mwalimu Kambarage Nyerere, whom I had the privilege of working under in the 1990s, did not even have a decent house in his rural home. It is the army that built him one as a retirement package. One house in Dar es Salaam. And he said at one time that the State House is a holy place. You must make your wife know, you must make your brother know, you must make your friends know. Ian Kama is doing a good job here in Botswana. Just read about him, a little more about him. Paul Kagame in Rwanda, even in terms of opening business, is doing something good. Have not heard anything untoward so far. I do not know, so I'll not comment. I want to be a good guest, so I'll not comment about it. So my own view is, therefore, is that African leaders must, you said, is it a congenital problem? I don't think it is congenital. I think one of the problems in Africa is impunity. Many Africans have gotten scot-free with many of their criminal activities that they think nothing can happen to them. Today, here in Namibia, I'm sure you have something called civic education. They say you educate people, you bring people at a seminar and you tell them corruption is bad, they know. You tell them that this is bad, they know. But they don't care. But why don't they care? Because corruption pays and nothing happens to them. The day you jail one cabinet minister here, jail one, and beyond the jailing you take all his or her gotten wealth, that is enough civic education for 20 years. That is enough civic education. The very last thing is about the Kenyan. I was acting on behalf of the chairman of the Electoral Commission in that matter alongside my other colleagues. And one of the most amazing things, since that decision, many people, including media houses, have asked me to give my comments. I said, I'm very slow. Why? The court has said that it will deliver a judgment in 21 days. I do not know the reasons. The only people who gave the reasons are the two judges who dissented. As a teacher of law and as a lawyer, in the fullness of time, it will be found that the dissenting judgments were the jurisprudentially correct judgments. Why? This is the basis on which the elections were nullified. That the Kenyan election says the Kenyan electoral process is a manual process with technological intervention at two levels. Level number one, at the point of identification. When I'm being identified, and on the date of identification or election, I was identified, my biometrics came forth, and I was given 6 ballot papers, and I cast all of them. The next level, even before that, in the event that I'm not identified, there is a default position where I can be identified manually. In some cases, it happened. The next level of intervention is at the level of transmitting the results. The court has said that whenever a returning officer, and we had 40,883 polling stations, they announce the result there, and the result announced by the returning officer is final there. Then it is collated by the returning officer. The presiding officer announces, the returning officer then fills a form called 34A, and using technology transmits it to the chair, who is the returning officer for presidential elections. Transmits what is already final. You remember, it is already final where it is, but transmits it for tallying, so that he adds all the 40,833 and 291 constituencies and comes up with a total and announces who is the winner in accordance with the elections. That happened. All the forms were there. But the law also says that those very forms which were transmitted electronically must be physically brought to Nairobi, and they were brought. And they were there. Now, the court says, because when they ordered that the servers be inspected within 1 day, while it had been submitted on behalf of the Electoral Commission that you needed at least 3 weeks, because our servers are in France by Saffron, and there is a support system from ADT in the United States, because that was not achievable for reasons that they did not summarize, the elections are therefore nullified. That is the case. And that is the decision that we have got to live with. Why? Because we must respect institutions. You know, it used to be said by one teacher that everybody knows the law except the judges, because that is why you have appeal courts to correct the decision. The only problem is that in the Supreme Court there is no other court. But my own view is I want to hear the reasoning of the judges in 21 days, because this was a majority ruling of 4-2. One of the judges fell ill during the process, so we had a 4-2 decision. Had it been 3-3, the elections would have stayed. So that is the position. What amazes me, and this is what I find unfortunate in Africa, when I read these things in Twitter, WhatsApp, and all manner of things, the most ignorant in the world are the most opinionated. People commenting on things that they have no idea about. Part of the problem in Africa, and permit me to use your question to answer this, is that Europe and America has given us a good thing called Twitter. They gave us another one called Facebook. They gave us another one called WhatsApp. Many of us think they are toys, and we use them with the slightest of discretion. And unfortunately, we of the middle class who have gone to school are the victims. We are the ones who say things that we don't think about. We are the ones who say things that we have no knowledge about. So right now it is being said, nullification of the election of the president in Kenya, that is good. Now democracy is working in Africa. Now institutions are working in Africa. Those who are Aboriginal English know, one swallow does not make a summer. It is a decision which has been arrived at, and we want to see what it will be said about it. Was it good for Kenya? Perhaps. So that this time round, whoever wins is not subject to the kind of doubt that we see. But that is what I can say about it. But this is the first time I'm speaking about it because I think that I want to see the reasoning before I arrive at it. But very lastly, and I hope this is the last thing, African captains of industry must be engaged in philanthropy. One of the things when you begin to see people engaging in philanthropy, it is a statement that they are no longer greedy. It is a statement that they have liberated themselves from want. Look at it. Organizations such as Ford Foundation, or this Rockefeller, or all these, they are giving to charity. And I believe that there are enough rich Africans, even if they are not rich, enough public-spirited, in fact I should say public-spirited individuals. That is the way you are going to kill civil society funding from Europe and America. When civil society in African countries are funded by Western organizations, I don't blame them. The saying is still true, he who pays the piper calls the tune. So if you want us to undertake research which is African-oriented, rich Africans like Aliko Dangote must make money, must give money to young Africans. Tony Elumelu must give money to young Africans. Patrick Mosepe must do the same. I do not know the richest man or woman in Namibia. Tell him I said he must give money. He must take 10% of his profit and give money to young Africans. And I'm also included in that assembly of men and women. So, in my view, if we do that, then we liberate our Africans from this gluttony. Don't be cheated. Africans are very good people. Negroids are very good people. But they are individuals who have been bitten by the bug of thievery and gluttony. But it's our duty to liberate them, and we will.